The Frighteners. Have you seen it? Probably not. I mean, if you have, kudos, but it's understandable if you haven't. Well, why not? The Frighteners was directed by Peter Jackson, the guy you most likely know as the director behind Lord of the Rings trilogy and the King Kong remake, and he also wrote it along with his wife, who also co-wrote most of his movies. It stars Michael J. Fox, who was still a pretty big star at the time. The movie has a really cool title and a bitchin' movie poster, so why didn't you see it? Because you probably thought it was a fucking goofy comedy about Marty McFly and his wacky ghost buddies. Yeah, that's the way they marketed the film. Yes, there are funny parts, and one character that is a complete fucking goofball. Yeah, there's a heavy comedic aspect to the film, and Michael J. Fox has been known primarily as a comedic actor. However, when I first saw this movie, I was actually surprised at the time how very little of it was goofy, and the fact that what comedy there was actually pretty dark, and that it was a legitimate horror movie. Also, I found the movie to be awesome, and I still think that to this day. It should interest you to know that this wasn't exactly Peter Jackson's first horror movie either. He had previously directed Dead Alive, or Brain Dead as it's called internationally. That one was another horror and comedy mixture, but it was also probably the goriest movie ever released. Seriously. I think most of the budget went to fake blood, it's just that gory. But anyway, The Frighteners. If you saw the trailer back then and you thought it looked lame, well, let me tell you what it's actually about. Fox plays Frank Bannister, a psychic medium who is mostly seen as a cheap con artist who shows up to funerals to offer his services to people, such as passing on messages from their departed loved ones. In almost every way, he's completely bogus, except he really can see, speak to, and even interact with ghosts. He has a few ghosts that hang around him and work up revenue for him as a ghostbuster. The racket goes that he'll give a person his card, and then the ghost will follow that person home and start moving shit around and making a racket, so they'll call Bannister, who will show up and do a whole fake routine that stops the ghost activity. He pulls this stunt on the Linskys, a couple whose fence he had crashed into earlier, enraging the husband, who wants to sue him for the fence and lawn repair. So he cooks up the whole ghost-busting shtick to call it even. However, the problem is, as he leaves, Frank sees glowing numbers on the guy's head, and then later the guy dies of an apparent heart attack, despite being in perfect health. The man's ghost seeks him out and demands explanations, but Frank doesn't have any. Meanwhile, these sort of mysterious deaths have been going on for a while, seemingly healthy people just dropping dead of heart attacks, but when autopsied they show no signs of a heart attack. Enter a mysterious cloaked figure who shows up and reaches into people's chest and squeezes their hearts until they die. This is the murderer, but appears as nothing more than a grim reaper, confounding Bannister. Now, it gets a bit complex, so hang on. Mr. Linsky's widow, Lucy, is a doctor who works at a clinic, and she fills in for another doctor that is sick, making a house call to this old bat who seems to be keeping her daughter prisoner in her house and beating on her, claiming that she's evil. While watching TV, Lucy sees a report on killers and sees about a spree killer named Johnny Bartlett who killed 12 people in a hospital before being captured and executed. The old lady's daughter, Patricia, was Johnny's girlfriend who was sent to prison but later released into her mother's custody. Lucy believes that Patricia had nothing to do with the murders and was just caught up and in love with the wrong guy. The numbers that appeared on Ray Linsky's head are part of a count. When they turn up in sequential order, the next person dies. Bannister seems to be with a lot of the victims before they die, so he's a person of interest, though the police don't really think he did it. This one nutball FBI guy seems to think that Frank can kill people with his thoughts, though, and, well, let's just say that guy's fucking crazy. Anyway, Frank almost kills himself so he can protect Lucy from the ghost killer, but she instead freezes him cryogenically. He'll only have a few hours, though, and he's not able to finish off the killer before he's called back to his body. The killer, as you might have guessed, is the ghost of Johnny Bartlett, and his girlfriend is his willing accomplice continuing their spree. They seem obsessed with counting their murders and are up to over 40, and want to have the highest body count of all time. And of course this leads to a big battle at the end with Bannister, Bartlett, and a shitload of ghosts, and a mystery from Bannister's own past is cleared up. I'm sure you could figure out how it turns out from there. Anyway, as I mentioned, this movie is awesome, but it very rarely gets any sort of real respect due to the fact that very few people actually went to see it, even though it got good reviews. Hopefully, I've managed to convince you that it's worth seeing, as I personally consider it to be sort of a cult classic of the 90s, a film that very few gave a chance, but is still waiting out there for you to see it. It's not perfect, however, and if I had to criticize it for one thing, it would be that there are a few moments, especially one-liners, that just seem to be designed for putting in a trailer, such as a ghost proclaiming, "He almost killed me," in a really worried and serious tone. Yeah, it's funny, but it really seemed to be just thrown in there so that the studio would have a big soundbite. And in the end, that sort of marketing is what hurt the film, not helped it. Overall, though, see it immediately. 9 out of a possible 10.